Thank you, Ernest. I appreciate that. Just so everyone knows, yes, we are recording this so that you can, if you have somebody that you think would like to see this segment, they can go back onto our website, northtexasuas.com. Kenny, do you mind putting that in the chat too? I'd appreciate that.
Sounds good. Give me a second.
Thank you. And we will be having a survey link in the chat. It's really important, especially for this year. We want to make sure that we're covering issues and providing information on things that you are really interested in the UAS industry. So please make sure that you fill out our survey for this year. And we're going to start in 1 minute. So again, hang in there. Really appreciate that you are joining us today. Our first workshop of the year 2022. Well, it is 10 o'clock. Happy New Year to everyone. Welcome to our first workshop of the year 2022. So we thought it would be great to have some of our leaders in the industry talk about their forecasting and what they believe will be eminent and influence our year 2022. There have been some conferences this past year and we've kind of looked at it. So I first want to introduce, well, let me go ahead. This is our 15th segment. The North Central Texas Council of Government has conveyed the North Texas Unmanned Aircraft Systems UAS Safety and Integration Task Force is to help mitigate reckless UAS operations and promote safe integration of the UAS technology in the DFW region and beyond. The concept, and we have Ernest Huffman here, who is going to be speaking on our panel today, but the concept is to keep our airspace safe so that we can utilize our drones, our drone technology, but in a safe way, and that the general public will see it as a benefit as opposed to a detriment. And I think that we've accomplished. We're keeping the conversation going, and this is our very first workshop was in 2020, and we had the FAA speak about the new laws and regulations, and we've progressed from there. We've been talking about a lot of things, careers, how drones are being used, the education, and today, again, we're going to be talking about the forecasting of the year 2022. We're starting off with a panel. I'm really excited. We've got Ernest Huffman from the North Central Texas Council of Governments. We have Adrian Doko from AUVSI, the Lone Star chapter, along with the president of the North Texas Drone Club. And we have Rhonda Johnson, who is from Houston, who owns a company for forensics. So we're going to start with Rhonda. Rhonda, if you don't mind, just join us and tell us a little bit about how you got into the drone industry and how you feel about this year 2022 and what to look forward to. Are you there, Rhonda?
Yes, I'm here. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides for you.
Wonderful. Welcome again. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the specifically the forensics. I mean, I think that's fascinating, and I think that the technology has really helped first responders.
Yes. So I've had a background in digital forensics. I've been teaching it at a local community college and also a local university. So I decided to incorporate that with my interest with drones. And it's a relatively new field, and I'm still learning a lot about it, but it's very exciting. And I forecast that there will be an increased demand for it.
I totally believe that. I think that the first responders are really one of the forefront industries that are using and utilizing this technology.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me go here. And I apologize to the audience. I have COVID and I'm losing my voice. So I'm gonna have to share share the screen. Let's see.
It looks wonderful. I mean, I can see the screen right now. And
Hello,
tell me
everyone.
again how you pronounce your company. Is it Ogun?
Ogun.
Ogun, okay.
Yes. It's named after the Yoruba Orisha who presents war and technology. LLC. We are a small startup based in Houston, Texas. We were originally founded last year.
Well, congratulations.
So our mission is to help bring affordable UAV training and other career development opportunities to individuals who may be interested in pursuing a UAV career. We're in the process of developing courses in UAV forensics and cybersecurity. So our courses are designed to provide an exciting introduction to UAV forensics and data analysis. And we also use games and simulation-based training in our courses. A little bit about me. I'm new to the UAV industry. I studied the use of drones in warfare in my undergraduate studies in military history and cybersecurity. So this company was created basically just to reflect my interest in UAV cybersecurity.
And just for the clarification, Rhonda, if you don't mind, explain, because when you say forensics, everyone thinks, oh, they're trying to forensics. It has to do with somebody dying, and then they're looking at exactly the cause of death. Forensics is so much wider than that. Do you mind kind of explaining that in kind of lame terms?
Okay, so drone forensics is basically the science of using validated tools to analyze data taken from drones. A lot of drone forensics is actually in the field of mobile forensics because a lot of people operate their drones using their smartphones. And basically it's just the extraction of data. So we may extract information like flight logs, audio, video from the drone in order to attribute ownership in criminal investigations. So drone forensics has been very popular now as criminals use the technology more frequently.
I know that there were a lot of investigations, like if there was an accident or something, they were able to use the forensic technology to kind of go back into the past on exactly how the accident occurred and maybe some of the reasons why it was, why there was an accident. Is that correct too? I mean, are you involved in that? Okay, great.
Oh, do you want to hear my predictions?
Yeah, that would be great.
So here are my predictions for 2022. So in the past year, drone technology companies have increased their attention to addressing cybersecurity challenges of drones. Several companies such as SkyGrid have unveiled cybersecurity products that incorporate machine learning and artificial intelligence. So machine learning helps drones learn how to recognize and navigate obstacles to avoid collisions. So I predict that we'll see more incorporation of the detect and avoid and command and control technologies in later drone models. So many of these newer products, they will be able to autonomously analyze payloads and detect malicious attacks and collect data that can be used for forensic investigations. There were also several important developments in the regulatory environment that happened this past year. We have the new guidance from the FAA regarding the beyond virtual line of sight operations. So once this guidance is established within the industry, that will also drive growth in autonomous drones. Also, I predicted there would be more drone use cases, particularly in the commercial sector, as more companies get authorization to conduct beyond virtual line of sight operations. I also see an increase of case uses or use cases in the delivery of medical equipment, such as defibrillators and personal protection equipment, since we're still in the midst of the pandemic. Also, when it comes to education and training, I think that there will be a shift from one pilot, one drone type operations to one pilot or autonomous operation of drones in multiple drones. So there will also be more emphasis on the firmware programming languages like C, C++, assembly, Python. And there will also be more drone coding classes offered. Also, with the increased use of drones and the increased use of criminals using drones in their activities, there will also be a continued increase in drone forensic analysis. Also, because of the CARES Act that was recently passed, where the federal government is investing $1 trillion in improving the country's infrastructure, I predict that there will be increased use of drones for inspection activities. So I see that part of the market growing a lot, with not just in 2022, but also in the beyond, Also, there will be a continued evolution of counter-drone technology and attacks. So hackers will continue to develop sophisticated methods to target data such as flight logs, photos, videos, and geolocation data that's collected by the drone. Also, there will be an increased interest in swarm attacks. So with the possibility of autonomous drones, there's also been an increase in swarm drone attacks, both offensively and defensively. DARPA recently conducted a field experiment where both aerial and ground autonomous robots conducted swarm exercises at Fort Campbell. It is also reported that during the ongoing conflict in Israel, there was also reports of swarms of drones carrying out reconnaissance using artificial intelligence technology. And lastly, I feel that there will be more drone-related activities in the secondary schools. There was a recent amendment to the FAA Reauthorization Act which gives FAA authorized community-based organizations more opportunity to introduce drones in the classroom. So I predict that there will be more drone-related programming in the schools, especially in the ROTC programs.
A lot of great insight there, Rhonda, especially because you're in the thick of things right now and you're seeing, firsthand the first of all, the capabilities of drone technology, but also, being involved in it, it also gives you a better view of, what we can do today, but also what we can do with the drone technology in the future. So that gives us some great insight. And you talked a little bit about remote ID, a little bit about the beyond visual line of sight. What do you see in 2022 being, out of all the things that you talked about, what do you think is probably the most prominent and we would see in the next couple of months?
I think there will be more attention paid to remote ID because without it, you'll have a lot. Well, I don't believe that you can have the operations over people or operations at night without the remote ID. So I think a lot of companies will try to either implement it or people will start talking about it more.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the questions we have in our survey today, I'd really like to hear what the audience feels the remote ID, if they agree on it or if they disagree, because right now there is some challenges in the courts in regards to if this is invading our privacy, and especially with the drone racing community. But what do you think is the most important with remote ID? Is it identifying who is operating the drones and what their mission is? Do you think that that's the most important? I mean, what do you feel the remote ID will assist in our new upcoming year?
I think it will assist law enforcement with like criminal investigations. They have to deal with the use of drones. Some of the cyber takeover technology that's used by security companies, it would be helpful for them to know which drones are legitimate and which drones are not. I think it's
go ahead.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
No, I was going to say, do you see a percentage? Because right now, I see the industry providing more benefits than, unfortunately, there are always some rogues out there that are using this technology for illegal purposes. But what do you think the percentage is? And from what I'm hearing on your list, there is an actual, the more we have users, right, drone users, the more intent on using it for illegal purposes. Do you see, is it being 1%, 2%, 5%? What do you see right now? And what do you think it'll be?
The percentage of malicious users of drones?
Yes.
I do believe it's growing, so maybe 5% or something like that. Right. I mean, it's not widely, it's not it's a reality, but there's still a relatively small number of criminals that's using drones. So I would say about 5%.
Yeah, and I think what I'm hearing is the people that are actually using drones in a malice way are not going to have the remote ID on their drone.
Yes.
So that makes it a little bit more difficult to identify who's operating it, where they're located and such. So I commend you again on what you're doing in this industry. And I love the fact that, number one, you're a woman and you're here in Texas. So I think it's fabulous. So I'd really like you to share a little bit about, there are a lot of people that view these workshops specifically because they want to be more involved, or if they want to get into the forensics. How do they go about that? Where would they start?
I would start by utilizing some of the open source tools, forensics tools that's available. Like I said, a lot of drone forensics is mobile forensics because you can use Autopsy and Cellbrite to analyze some of the information on the drones.
Okay.
So I would just say maybe start with like a hobby, like a recreational drone, and just learn how to maybe reverse engineer it. Because in order to conduct forensic investigations, you'll have to take the drone apart. And
Really?
just to
See,
get,
I had no idea that you would have to do that.
mm-hmm. Yeah, so just sort of play around with the drones that you have or can afford. I
And
know a
right
lot
now,
of,
do you offer classes in this specifically on the flying of the drone or the actual technology to conduct the forensics?
we're developing courses to actually conduct a forensic analysis on drones.
When do you
Hopefully it will
course?
be,
Yeah, go ahead.
hopefully it'll be available by the middle of this year.
Wonderful. And so make sure that you share your information on the chat so that if people want to follow up and see, the progression of these courses, I think that would be amazing.
Okay.
How many people are on your team right now?
About three.
And are they all drone operators or data collectors? What are the positions?
They mainly have a background in mobile forensics. I think I may have one certified pilot, FAA pilot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is just a small team.
And what drone do you use to
We
collect
mostly
data?
use the DJIs, so like the DJI Phantom 4.
I love that. I love that one.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites. I know it's old fashioned, but it's one of my favorites. Well, audience, I'd really like to encourage you to ask any questions for Rhonda. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Just hang out there because I know that there'll be questions in the future. I wanted to move next to Ernest Huffman, and I met Ernest with the North Central Texas Council of Governments when they put together our first meeting for our region. There's 16 regions here in the North Texas area, correct, Ernest?
Well, so just to back up, I'm Ernest Huffman. I'm the program manager for North Central Texas Council of Governments Aviation program. And under our purview are 16 counties here in North Texas that we represent primarily on the surface transportation planning side of things. And what Maggie was alluding to, I started back in 2018, the UAS, or North Texas UAS Safety and Integration Initiative. That's the omnibus program that we created to integrate drone-related program, unmanned aircraft system programming, urban air mobility, advanced air mobility, et cetera, into the Metroplex. And with these workshop series, we're interested in, Maggie mentioned it earlier, but the general education of our recreational and commercial service pilots in the area, getting them the tools they need to succeed and efficiently integrate into our airspace. And that's what we're doing here. And I'm here to talk about what we're doing at North Central Texas in 2022, some updates on what the task force is going to be doing, as well as some other initiatives in the Metro.
Yes, and I also want to mention that this is beyond just the North Texas region. I mean, you have put together an amazing panel and committee specifically, once a month. I wanted you to touch on, a little bit about what we do once a month, where we bring the industry to a platform where we talk about the different industries, like Rhonda's company, sharing that information. It's a great place to network. It's a great place to understand our resources, not only here, but beyond. So go ahead and tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So there was a vacuum, in particular regionally and locally, on folks collaborating, networking together in industry to integrate to technology. So with the initiative, we created a major stakeholder group and forum called the North Texas UAS Safety and Integration Task Force. That's the main stakeholder group that we allow folks from in the region, out of the country to join up, collaborate with us in region, network together, strategize together on how to grow the region's drone industry or unmanned aircraft system industry. And we started back in the beginning, Maggie, and we talk about this a lot, with maybe 20 to 25 folks, and now we're almost close to 400, almost 200 organizations. We're worldwide, we got international participation now. And it's one of those things that we're seeing now being instituted in other regions around the country, where folks are pulling from our ideas and seeing the viability of having that type of stakeholder group. And that stakeholder group is open to anyone on this call. a lot of business gets done. Maggie got this opportunity to run this particular program via via her interaction within that task force, and everybody has that opportunity as well.
Yeah, I would love to see Rhonda specifically speak at one of your committees.
Yep.
So that would be great. But tell us a little bit about breaking it down on the working groups, not only being a presenter or networker, but also sharing ideas and supporting us regionally.
So just to tie in my 2022 expectations, I'll talk about, and we have every month we have those task force meetings planned. So the next meeting will be January 25th, where we'll have the task force meeting. Great agenda being planned for that. We look forward to hearing. And Rhonda might want to hear about this. We got a woman speaking on cybersecurity in the industry and working that angle. And we got 2 women business owners speaking. Another woman who owns a drone-related UTM management company. She's going to be speaking. We have the folks from the Know Before You Fly FAA app speaking. So Aloft will be speaking on that application and outlining how to use that and new functionality that they're adding on a year-to-year basis that I wasn't aware of. We're going to get a presentation on that. And then last but not least, we're going to get a real robust presentation. Every year, Interlink does a survey of all major aviation employers in the region on what skills they need in employees, how many employees they're looking for, how many interns, the stuff they're looking to do in 2022 and beyond. And they're going to be presenting those survey results at that meeting. So that's going to be happening in that task force. But to jump to your question, Maggie, on the working groups, the task force is the main stakeholder groups, but to work on the specific details on how we're integrating the technology, we have 5 working groups that we're looking for participation from industry, government, academia, anybody who's interested to help us with those details. And Maggie's the leader and the chair of our education and public awareness working group. That's where this program was born. We also have a legislative and policy working group where we focus on local, or not even local, but state and federal legislation and policy. Then we have our training and workforce related working groups where we focus on standardizing training in the region and workforce development. We have an integration working group where we focus on getting cities and companies to integrate drone technologies into their workflows and getting them the resources they need. And last but not least, we have a community integration working group that is comprised of only the cities in our metropolitan area that are interested in those high level integration to drone technologies, urban air mobility, advanced air mobility, et cetera. And those folks collaborating on how to do so. So those are all opportunities for folks. Not the last working group, but the first 4, we get permission, we allow anybody to participate with their brain power on those particular initiatives. And to speak to that, going forward, we're doing those every month as well. We typically have those meetings the following week after each task force meeting. So for example, the task force meeting will be January 25th, and the following week will be that next Tuesday will be the 1st of February will be those working group meetings.
Ernest, will you tell us a little bit about how to get involved, contacting you specifically if they want to present at the task force meeting or if they want to be involved in the task force committees?
Yeah, so the process in presenting on a task force meeting, you got to have a viable reason to present. You let me know and we'll meet face to face to talk about what your presentation will be, your company, what you want to present. And it's as simple as that. I get you on the agenda and I allow almost anybody to do that as long as they're in the industry and they have a viable message to talk. So we definitely want to get Ms. Johnson on to do a future presentation so folks can, because we haven't had anybody talking drones and forensics yet. And that's something that's, in particular from the vein that you're speaking of. We talk about accident reconstruction and things of that nature, but not necessarily the forensics you're talking about. So love to have you on. And that's an opportunity for anybody who's starting their own drone business, doing something in academia, doing something anywhere in the space. We want to get you involved with the presentations.
So I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you see in just this year, 2022.
2022, man. So we've come a long way since we started in 2018 in terms of recognition and in terms of the motivations of folks and the momentum. So the momentum we're bringing in 2022 is amazing. And I'll start with one of the significant changes in 2021 that's going to lead to significant changes in 2022 and then beyond in the state of Texas. And that was the enacting of the Texas Uam Council. That was the state of Texas holding up their hands, saying they're interested in integrating and talking seriously about integrating unmanned air, UAM traffic, advanced air mobility, et cetera. And they're tasked with coming out with recommendations for legislation as well as policy and funding by the end of the summer with that UAM Council. And that's something that wasn't done in the state of Texas. So with that Texas UAM Council, and those meetings are public. If you visit our website, we're going to be posting the links when we get them to those particular meetings. But we see that as an opportunity for the state of Texas now, not just North Texas, to get heavily involved in integrating the technology. So that's in 2022, the establishment of that state-led coalition is a plus for our region and going forward in the future. Another big thing is we've started, and Maggie mentioned this earlier, how we're connecting our region to other regions around the country, and we've been successful in doing that in Central New York, Chicago, Southern California, et cetera. And now we're really bearing down and starting to collaborate with our immediate friends to the north in Oklahoma, in particular the Choctaw Nation and their UAS testing zone. We're collaborating to host a conference in early April. It's going to be called the Emerging Aviation Technology Conference, hosted by Choctaw Nation in collaboration with us. You're all invited to that. And as soon as I get to save the date, we had to push it back due to COVID. It was, bless you, Maggie. It was initially hosted supposed to be hosted end of January, but we moved it back to April for COVID. So anybody's invited to that. And those folks at Choctaw Nation are heavily connected. So we might have Pete Buttigieg as our guest speaker, Secretary of Transportation, and we're going to really get in the weeds. So another thing we're doing with those folks, and we've just started the initial discussions on establishing a UAM corridor from Oklahoma down to the city of Frisco. So we're going to be collaborating with them as well. That's new information. You guys are the first to hear about it, and we're excited about opening those discussions with our friends to the north. But that's the type of collaboration that the industry needs to continue to go forward. Another big thing that we're laying our hats on in 2022 is now there's funding being made available to not only the drone industry, but unmanned aircraft, advanced air mobility, and folks like us to do the work of integrating the technology. So we're really excited about the various funding mechanisms that are out there. In particular, the big infrastructure bill has allocated some money to help us get the job done. There's going to be some money allocated to new businesses in emerging technology space that all of you can take advantage of, and we're excited about that. A lot of funding on the education side, so university research, internships, externships, workforce development. A lot of funding coming out on the federal and hopefully later on down the line the state level for that. Funding made available for studies, and last but not least, the state Department of Transportation has made $100 million available over the last 5 years for emerging technology pilots around the country. We're going to go after that in our region, specifically for drone integration, in particular, advanced air mobility, automated technologies, et cetera. That's in 2022. We didn't have any of that available funding throughout the year. So that's something we're all excited about going forward. And anybody have any questions on any of those items I mentioned or not?
I don't see any questions at this time. A lot of resources that are posted in the chat, which I appreciate everyone contributing to that. In particular on that funding part, which is really exciting because it shows that the government is investing because they see the future with UAS, UAM. And Rhonda, this would be something for you to look into, but how do we find out what's available and who do we need to contact for the funding?
So what I would do, join our task force every month as more and more information comes out on what those funding mechanisms are and how they're made available to the public. Majority of the ones I mentioned, they haven't outlined the application process yet. So when we know that, first place I go to it is the task force. We'll present on it, probably get someone more expert in it to present on how we can all go after that funding and go from there. But join the task force, and that way you'll get on our newsletter, our contact list when I have any news information I put out. you'll get it as soon as I do. Best way to do it.
Now, one thing that you haven't mentioned is about the NASA initiative and how we're, regionally, how we're working with them.
Yeah. So another thing in 2022, we were fortunate to be able to partner with NASA in 2021 on a partnership to integrate advanced air mobility technologies in the Metroplex, and they're helping to streamline those efforts. They're going to be presenting a white paper on our workshops we've been conducted with them over the last year or so by the summer. So summer of 2022, that white paper will be made available to the world, and it's best practices on how to integrate drone technologies in the metropolitan areas, all worked through our workshops and other workshops they've had throughout the country. And we're going to use that as a template to go forward with working with NASA to get more detailed infrastructure demands met and funding, et cetera. So by 2022, summer of 2022, that white paper will be produced and made available to the public.
I see specifically one of your roles is to encourage industry to come here locally in Texas. In other words, whether they're a company that, like Rhonda's company, where they provide a service, but also building, and supporting this new infrastructure, whether it be the equipment or the software. What is it that, can you give us a little bit of a sales pitch, as they speak, of why it's so important to encourage and to invite industry to come to this area, kind of like a hub, so that we can work together? Because most of the time when you have companies, they're going to be collaborating with other companies, and it's great to have those resources here in Texas.
I mean, the main point of it is, and folks working in industry realize the industry is siloed and is fragmented around the country. You can go to one place of the country and you can find a center of gravity. You go to another, you find a center of gravity. And what's lacking is a highly concentrated center of gravity analogous to Silicon Valley, where that industry can coagulate, concentrate, and work together, not only though on the safety issues, not only on the networking, but it's really about the crowd funding, the funding, the investing. That's what's lacking. So when you can centrally locate an industry in a geographical location, that just serves the industry well from an investment perspective. Now, the reason why the state of Texas is perfect for that is because our aerospace pedigree, our citizenry, everybody in our region from aviation perspective understand the industry, because you have 6 degrees of separation from the industry, whether you know somebody who works in that industry, you know someone who's educated in that industry. If you live here, you know someone who's working in aviation has a vested interest. And when you work and working with folks who don't have that environment, like for example, and I know Ms. Jupe and those folks in South Africa can probably speak to that, where you don't have a concentration of aviation industry, you're banging your head against the wall by yourself. Coming here to North Texas, you're not only going to get a workforce that's trained in aviation that understands it, you're going to get a supply chain that understands it, and you're going to get an investor group that understands investing in aviation technologies, which is paramount in getting any startup up and running.
I agree. And also the understanding of the needs of this industry when you talk to like-minded people. And that's one of the reasons why I got involved in the first place, talking to people that understand what the technology is and where it's going and the capabilities, and also the imagination, because we really need creative, imaginative people so that we don't have the boundaries of somebody dictating exactly how it's going to be. And I see in the year 2022, the FAA is a lot more tangible. In other words, they're open to, they're a lot more open, as opposed to just saying, hey, we're the regulatory system and you're going to do what we want you to do. I see them being a lot more open to our suggestions and our input and to support us. What do you think about that?
No, they have to be, because, and I can speak from the FAA's perspective and having worked with them over the years from the aviation planning perspective, they don't have the bandwidth to accommodate a new industry of this type. I mean, they're traditionally focused on manned aviation, have been for decades. So any new emerging technology, they weren't built to accommodate fast. And so they got to listen to the community. And that's just what it is. And Megan, I want to hop, because I know we want to get to Adrian. I have a few more items on what's to come in 2022 from our perspective.
Yeah,
one of the big items is we're going to be doing an update on our North Texas General Aviation and Heliport Vertiport System Plan. That's our system plan where that's our main planning document we do every 10 to 15 years, where we tie in, we create the network of airports, heliports, and then in this instance now, vertiports, make sure it aligns with our demographics, our population trends, our economic trends, etc. So we're doing that. We just asked the FAA for funding for that. And then what that's going to help us do is tie in our airport network to the heliports and then help us understand where the new vertiports need to go and how that system ties into the overall aviation landscape. So we're excited about that opportunity. Another thing is we're going to be doing a lot more community outreach. Now, in the years of COVID, we couldn't do any of it. Now we're getting more requests doing outreach events in person, et cetera. And Maggie and team, you guys learn about that soon. We're going to be doing that for the workforce development portion, getting funding to try to create an apprenticeship program, an internship and externship program to that end, et cetera. So more to come on that. I just mentioned the increase in workforce development initiatives. So much opportunity out here, so many opportunities to get into communities who don't traditionally migrate to STEM fields and get them involved. So we're talking about those female and those women communities, and you guys are doing a great job in doing that. From my perspective, the Black and Brown community. So I've been working to tie those communities to our industry, and I'm very excited in 2022 being able to lay some seeds and some real groundwork and getting them involved. And last but not least, Maggie and team, we're going to see a heavy uptick in the region from our cities integrating the technology and what's going on. And that's really inclusive of the package delivery stuff. Last year, we seen City of Frisco's Little Elm get Google Wing doing beyond visual line of sight package delivery. They're going to see so much more of that going on in 2022 in our region, and every major city in the metro. That's inclusive of Dallas, Fort Worth, and others. And we're excited about those opportunities, things we didn't see coming, even in the start of 2021.
I see that there's a lot of involvement with the Arlington area, specifically, the sports arenas there and how they're trying to bring this technology. And Adrian can talk a little bit about that because I know he's been involved in that too. Can you tell us a little bit about your collaboration?
Yeah. So we've established a beyond visual line of sight operation in the Arlington Entertainment District. Main point was to demonstrate that we can put in a radar detection related system, low altitude weather related system to streamline operations in these highly critical epic centers of activity. So it allows law enforcement to monitor the airspace properly and respond to incidents and do accident reconstruction, traffic monitoring, et cetera. But it also allows package delivery folks to get in there and explore some opportunities for commerce. So we're doing that in an Arlington Entertainment District. We got AT&T Stadium there, Ranger Stadium, Six Flags, a gaming arena, tons of stuff out there. And we're doing drone related activities out there as well. And I didn't mention this, guys, we're really focused on tying the automated air stuff to the automated ground stuff, because that industry is taking off as well. So anything we can piggyback, any gains we can piggyback on, joining with them in collaborations we can do on that side of things, we're going to do as well. So you're going to see drones being talked about in the same sentences, automated ground vehicles, electric vehicles on the ground, and electric vehicles in the air.
I think it's fantastic. And we do have already some really strong players here in regards to the industry. We've got Bell Flight, and we have HAF, and we have a lot of industry. So yeah, we would like to encourage that. And speaking of that, I want to introduce you to Adrian Doko, because Adrian Doko is very involved. He's the president of AUVSI, one of the largest chapters here, along with the North Texas Drone Club. So Adrian, welcome to our panel. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the UAS industry and the buzz around AUVSI? And by the way, do you mind telling us a little bit about what AUVSI stands for, just for the newbies here?
You bet. Thank you, Maggie. And that's going to be hard to top after Ernest's presentation. But AUVSI is the Association for Uncrewed, I should say, Vehicle Systems International. We are the largest nonprofit community that advocate, educate, and connect people with the networking that's necessary to move these technologies forward. I'm also the president of the local North Texas Drone Users Group. We are the largest drone community, whether it's recreational or professional Part 107 operators. And we gather on a monthly basis for fly-ins where we educate people and try to update people on the latest regulations and rules. But it's phenomenal to be a part of this panel, Maggie, and I can't thank you enough for inviting us.
Well, you have to mention also, you have your own company. And one of the things that really attracted me to what you're doing is the infrared. And you also have been doing a lot with, when we talked about the Arlington sports area, you've been involved in that. So I commend you on that too. So give us an idea of what you're hearing, the buzz, for the year 2022. And I also kind of mentioned previously before we started, I'd really like to hear your insight on the remote ID and what's coming.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we have to understand, as critical regulations start to take shape and new technologies emerge, one thing is clear, we're on the brink of something huge. We're entering the golden age of aviation. Of completely transforming the way the world works. So to fully understand what's possible now and what's coming down the pike and how you can use these shifts in technology and policy to gain a competitive edge, with uncrewed and autonomous systems, is we need to support the communities like Ernest, like AUVSI, like the North Texas Drone Users Group to further the initiative. As far as remote ID, it's a little unfortunate. The regulations are not catching up to the technology. We're always a couple of steps behind, but that's a good thing. It's a blessing in disguise at times. A lot of people don't understand the need for remote ID, but for us to move this technology forward, we're going to have to start implementing some sort of regulation where, the same thing happened when automobiles were, initiated. We didn't think there was a need for regulation, but fortunately, after 70 plus years, we have a highway system, we have safety systems in place to mitigate risk and just to make things safer overall. So remote ID is going to be crucial for us moving forward. And I really think we need to be a little more patient and give remote ID a chance. A lot of people are trying to implement new regulations or legislative hurdles that might hinder the industry. But beginning of this year, October 1st of this year is when the manufacturers will be, implementing remote ID modules into these aircraft. And I think it's a great step forward for us to industrialize the new golden age of aviation.
I totally agree with that. I think that that's important. Initially, remote ID, what was the initial idea through the FAA and the industry? What was remote ID? What was the purpose of remote ID? And what do you see again, how it's evolved?
Yeah, so here at AUVSI, we've pushed for remote ID and industrializing the certification body. So remote ID would be that missing piece of the puzzle, that component, if you will, that would allow us these newer technologies like beyond visual line of sight, like unmanned traffic management. And we might even be implementing blockchain to achieve some of that on top of remote ID. So remote ID is a crucial, necessary subject that we need for our industry to get to that next level, to get to drone taxis or package delivery or beyond visual line of sight. And the FAA has reached out to industry entities such as AUVSI to kind of lead the narrative and try to figure out the best way forward without hindering industry particularly. So AUVSI has been a huge proponent for the past 7 or 8 years. We want something like this so we can grow our businesses at the molecular level. However, there's going to be a lot of pushback. We function in a democracy and everyone has their own opinion. So we're willing to sit down and talk with other people on why this would benefit our industry. So moving forward, remote ISD is going to be huge. I just think we need to be patient and give it a chance.
I agree. And, you know, with going to some of the conferences, thank goodness we have some of our conferences now that we can meet in person and talk about the progression of the UAS industry. Last year in Vegas at the commercial UAS, I saw that there were a lot of technology on mapping. I thought that, and surveying 3D models. What do you see happening this year? Do you think there's going to be even more emphasis on it? In other words, you know, like Rhonda's company, you know, in the forensics, I think that that's going to be really key to have. I think in the next 5 years, we won't know what we could do without it. In other words, you know, it's going to be a necessary service. But what other things do you see in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. As we explore different payload packages on these uncrewed systems like sensors, we saw a lot of LiDAR last year. And you've noticed Facebook has switched and pivoted to a metaverse. So if you can imagine creating a virtual planet Earth, if you will. So I see a lot of use for the metaverse or a digital twin of our planet. But also implementing more blockchain technologies where we could kind of use that technology to create a safer airspace. You know, as the lead FAA drone pro here in North Texas, we try to educate people on why we need to create a safe airspace. Specifically here in North Texas, we have some of the most complicated airspace in the nation. But I think blockchain and new sensor payloads are going to be really critical for pushing the envelope on the technology. So phenomenal question. Thanks, Maggie.
Peter Sash from the FAA was one of our presenters in November. And specifically, he talked about that, you know, what they're looking for in the future, how the FAA is going to help the progress of some of this technology, and it being specifically about, you know, imagine the sky being the highway now, as opposed to just the highway, you know, with the cars. Now you're going to see a lot more activity up in the air. So I definitely think that that's going to be one of the things to look forward to. Payloads, again, I think that that's really important. Like Ernest had mentioned about Frisco being one of the initiatives to show how payloads can, you know, delivery services can actually work and work in an environment that's safe. What other things do you see in the future? You know, maybe not necessarily implementing, but at least starting the conversation.
You know, it's hard to speculate. A lot of these companies, unfortunately, are keeping everything tight-lipped. I really wish the industry or the, you know, uncrewed community would really get together and have an open way to share ideas. But like I said earlier, you know, the potential is limitless once we all get together. And this is one of the things that AUVSI does really well. No other, you know, community or organization would you see competitors that would join an association, for example, Google, Amazon. But what we do, or what we're really good at, is advocating and educating people, and at the end of the day, connecting people with that network. So in the future, besides the technology itself, I really wish we would come together as a community and just work together, like Ernest at the North Central Texas Council of Governments. I think he's pioneered this initiative where we can work together for the same cause and be profitable at the end of the day. So I really wish, you know, the technology is going to innovate itself, but at the end of the day, we need to understand the human factor, and we need to understand that together we can grow this community much better versus trying to do it on our own.
Yeah, and I read an article. It was an article that was put out last year, and I was talking about the strength of the industry. And really, where you find strength is when you're collaborating and you're networking and you're working together. Maybe having different approaches to, you know, the solutions, but actually, you know, working together will make such a stronger industry in the future. So I agree with that. I also wanted to touch, and we're going to be talking to Sharon Rossmart from Women in Drones in our next segment here. But I think the idea about inviting diversity in this industry. Can you tell us a little bit about how AUVSI is encouraging diversity and why it's so important, not only to get the collaboration from the different industries, but also bringing different backgrounds, people from different areas coming together and finding those solutions?
Yeah, absolutely. And our president of AUVSI, Brian Nguyen, he's one of the members of the Drone Advisory Committee, and he championed one of the way we keep everyone, we don't want to alienate anyone, and we kind of pushed for the uncrewed part of UAS, along others, as well as Sharon from Women Who Drone, and the FAA has taken note, and they've actually formulated a committee to come up with some sort of resolution. So in the next month, I see a lot of different things changing, specifically that one word, unmanned. I believe it's going to transition to uncrewed. This way we can open our arms to everyone, whether different races, genders, what have you. But that's going to be a huge step for us moving forward. And this is the easiest way to get into aviation. I know Ernest preaches about this all the time. What other industry, specifically in the aviation sense, can you get in at $150? You can become a remote pilot. So I'm really optimistic moving forward that we will be inclusive and not alienate anyone to this industry. And that's one of the most exciting facets of this industry is, the ability to be all inclusive, and anyone could have a piece of this dream. So I think it's a great step forward.
Yeah, I think it's imperative to have this industry grow the way it needs to grow, is having that diversity. And Rhonda being a great example of, having somebody that didn't even understand this technology, when she first got into forensics, and now utilizing this as a tool is pretty fascinating. I really appreciate that. Well, I want to move over. If there's anything else that one of the things I wanted you to plug, by the way, Adrian, is your clubhouse. I think that's another platform that we really haven't touched on, and I want to encourage everyone to get onto Clubhouse. I work with Don Zaldi in laws and regulations with drones, but can you talk a little bit about how you've really helped promote and also reach out to a new network of drone enthusiasts or people that are interested in getting into this?
Yeah, absolutely. So Clubhouse is a new phenomenon. For those that you haven't heard of it before, it's an app that you can download on your phone or even your computer now. But essentially, we developed the Drone Club to educate people on, we've heard a lot of misinformation out there. So we figure we take the initiative and start this Drone Club about a year ago. And we've grown it to the largest drone affiliated community on the Clubhouse app. And every week, every Saturday, 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern, we'll host a roundtable or offer some unique guests to discuss, what's going on in the industry. And it's grown to become a way to understand and really educate people on different protocols internationally. I mean, we have guests from, the Middle East. We have all over the world talking about different subjects, in the uncrewed system space. So it's grown, and I'm really happy that people are embracing it and learning a lot from it, because this is the easiest way to get out there and communicate. Specifically as a drone pro, we try to educate and preach safety and teach people on taking your trust test if you're a recreational pilot, and learning about, the different components of these systems. So it's moving forward, and we're growing day by day. We actually have one today at 3 p.m. But I also wanted to give an opportunity to your guests to understand North Texas has been, the leader in the nation as far as hosting events, conferences, if you will. I know this year, Public Safety Robotics Summit will be hosted in Austin, March 28th through the 30th. The Law Enforcement Drone Association also has their event in Fair Park, Dallas, April 11th to 14th. And I left links to those below. Vertical Flight Society, which is a huge proponent of vertical takeoff and landing, they'll be hosting an event in Fort Worth, May 10th through the 12th. We also have AUVSI Exponential, the largest unmanned system conference, and that's going to be in Orlando, April 25th to the 28th. And then finally, the Energy Drone and Robotics Coalition, which takes place in Houston. That'll be June 20th through the 22nd, I believe.
Oh, June, because it was like October last year. So
yeah, it was different because of COVID. And then also March 19th, we started a grassroots initiative. We're going to be hosting the North Texas Drone Workshop here in Dallas. And we're going to be teaching courses specifically to the vocations of each drone application. So for example, we'll have mapping courses. And this will be a live in-person event. We'll have one day in the classroom, and the second day will be hands-on out in the field where you can learn how to map, you can learn how to shoot cinematic videography, FPV, aerial thermal imaging, and other opportunities to grow your skill set and create your own business for 2022. So look out for that, and we'll keep you posted.
What else? Can you mention a little bit about what the Lone Star chapter is going to be doing? Other than that, because I know that you've got some other activities. One of the things that I think have been very popular is your drone swaps.
Yeah, the swap meets were really cool.
Yes.
You know, people are coming and selling drones, buying drones, they're getting together, having conversations, talking shop. You know, that's one of the, so, you know, the Lone Star chapter has been successful because we've offered opportunities for the community to get together. Every month we get together, whether it's at the swap meet, a fly-in, workshops, but what we really need to focus on is the advocacy portion and the public perception. A lot of people don't understand what's going on behind the scenes, but at the state level, there's laws and municipalities and cities, and I'm sure Ernest can attest to this, there's laws being created that are hindering or slowing down our industry because a lot of these legislators are misguided or don't really understand the technology. So they try to get ahead by implementing these misguided rules or regulations. So we really have to be vigilant and advocate and support these people that are out there explaining, hey, listen, you might be, if you really understand the positive, because the media hasn't done a great job of shedding a positive light on the industry. So if we take that role, I think we'll be a lot more successful moving forward.
Well, since you've been the president, I really see a lot of improvements, a lot of more motivation and involvement. And like you said, these local activities or events have really made a difference. So I really appreciate that. And we are exactly 11 o'clock and I'm so excited. Thank you so much, Adrian and Rhonda and Ernest for your insight. I really appreciate that. We have Sharon Rossmark, who always does our next segment. She has two amazing women from South Africa that's also going to give us a perspective of what they foresee in the year 2022. So welcome, Sharon. Thank you for coming back. Sharon was in the CES announcing the Women to Watch just Thursday. So I was really excited to see you there. So welcome again. I'm so glad that you were able to join us on your busy schedule.
Well, thank you, Maggie, and thanks for the introduction. And also thanks to Rhonda, Ernest, and Adrian for sharing their insights into 2022. So as we look forward into 2022, those of us in the UAS sector of aviation, we know that this is truly a dynamic time in aviation. We're seeing rapid shifts in business strategy process and strategic shifts to focus on the changing landscapes. That said, we felt it was important when looking forward into 2022 and beyond that we share perspectives representing an international view. So joining me for this conversation are two colleagues engaged in the drone sector of the South African aviation industry. So Luis and Kim, if you could turn on your cameras and join us, that would be great. Luis Jupp and Kim James are from South Africa and they're evening over there. So we appreciate them taking their Saturday evening to join us. So our topic for today is making a difference in 2022 and beyond. And in this case, it's the UAS market in South Africa. Let's start with having our guests introduce themselves. Kim, let's start with you. And please share your screen as well as introduce yourself to the audience with a little bit about your background and your sector of the industry.
Hi, yeah, thank you so much for having me on. Let me just share this. there you go. You should see my screen now.
Not yet, Kim.
Not yet?
Not yet.
Okay. It's showing that it's let's try this again. Okay.
There we go. Now just do full screen, please.
Okay, there you go. You should have it. Perfect.
Yes. Thank you.
So I love the fact that Louise and I are on together. We seem to tag team quite a lot, and we love doing these tag team gigs. As I said earlier on, I am not suited and booted today because I'm literally off this session straight out to a night shift with my drone security team. I'm taking one for the team today, so this is me. Let me do a quick intro. I am the director of a commercial drone operation here in South Africa called UAV Aerial Works, and we also have a drone security brand called Drone Guards, and that speaks for itself. For my sins, I am the CAA appointed safety and security post holder for our company. So I'm a very popular person in our company, not. I also have the privilege of sitting on the board of COASA, which is our commercial, and I hope we can change it to Uncrewed Aircraft Association of Southern Africa. And this is the representative body for all commercial drone operators. And this is where a lot of work is going to happen this year to move our industry. And I'll refer to that in a bit. I also sit on the Drone Council of South Africa, which is in its kind of second year. And I'm a chamber chairperson for new applicants who want to become drone operators. And of course, my favorite gig of all is a Women in Drones advisor, but we together, Louise and I, present and host our weekly drone dates, which is our fireside chat. And then I've had the pleasure of co-authoring 2 books with Louise, which was super fun, and we're super proud of those. So yeah, I came into this industry really from a non-aviation, non-tech background. I've been in investment banking for almost 25 years, but always worked with people, process, and technology. And when this opportunity came up to work in aviation, and specifically in a commercial drone operation, we set that up from scratch. It's people, process, and technology. So I used my skills, and I'm in convert. So that's me in a nutshell. And maybe we can skip to Louise for her intro, if that works.
Yes, great. Well, Louise, welcome. And please share a little bit about your background with our audience today.
Cool. Thank you, Sharon. Thanks very much for the introduction. Yes. How can I follow on from Kim? I'm the founder of Terrico Aviation, and based here in South Africa. And really the focus is on promoting drone technology for sustainable food production. I actually have an environmental management background, and it's very important to me that we get food production correct within us, in a sustainable manner, because of the way in which things are changing, which I will come to later on. But really, I'm very interested in the sort of sustainable food production benefit of drone technology. I also do a lot of promoting the professional drone industry, because I heard it said on one of the previous presentations there that media can actually present the wrong picture. And it's really important to present the professional drone industry, what professionals are doing. And so, yes, Kim mentioned it. Been doing the Drone Professional book series, going to start the 3rd one this year soon. And those have been great fun. Had a lot of input from people from around the world, giving their advice, their inputs into the drone industry to share with others. I've also written a book about the use of drones in agriculture. I get involved as an advisor, judging panels. And again, like with Kim, just really proud to be a part of spearheading the first international chapter of Women and Drones in Africa, and it's been a fantastic year. We started it last year, and the interest, the passion, the involvement of people from across the continent. We're hoping to get more and more people from across Africa, but we've, Southern Africa, Zanzibar, we've had all sorts of inputs from everywhere. And as I said, the passion, the drive, the willingness, I want to get involved in this industry. I want to do things in my community with drones. The passion that women have here using drones or teaching or whatever it might be is really incredible. So Kim and I have had a lot of fun this year, and with you, of course. It's been a really interesting year, and the fireside chats have been such fun. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell, and that's pretty much where we're coming from.
Well, great. Thank you for sharing that. So Kim, let's start with you. Please give an overview of the changing regulatory landscape in South Africa.
Sure, with pleasure. So I've just prepared a slide here. It's very tricky to try and put this into 1 or 2 slides. Let's see if I can get this across in this one. So basically, we run a certification model in South Africa. We had what we call Part 101 promulgated in 2015, and basically it is the most, we think, and we are told, the most highly regulated environment that we work in. Anyone who wants to do anything in the drone industry for profit, gain or benefit, basically anything other than a hobbyist flying in your back garden, you essentially need to be certified. And so having a remote operating certificate means you have to get a air service license from the Department of Transport. Your company has to be licensed as a drone operator. And there's a 5-phase process, which takes anything between now 9 months and 2 years to obtain. The pilot, at least one pilot, has to be certified as a remote pilot. And that includes a restricted radio license, which is the same radio license that a private pilot has to do, as well as what we have here is a Class 3 medical, which includes lung function tests and all sorts of things, because apparently we fly really high. So, the barriers to entry are quite high. And then, of course, the drone, no matter what size and what you are going to do with this drone, needs to be registered. We actually even have tail numbers. I believe in the US, you used to have that. We have tail numbers. They have to be displayed on the actual drone. And we have to have third-party liability insurance on every drone, which starts at a minimum amount. And then you may operate. And then, that license is granted to you on an annual basis. And on passing a renewal audit, you then are granted a permission to continue operating for the next year. This approximately, just to get a license to operate, would probably start at like $20,000 US. So it is a huge, there is a huge barrier to entry. There is a high level of frustration, and we have less than 100 registered commercial drone operators in South Africa. So what's the next step? And it's not like we're starting from the get-go, because there are already very clever people working on this, and we're already a little bit kind of down the way. But moving from the certification model to a categorization model is what we're aiming to do. We don't want to copy and paste from anywhere else. However, what we see as opportunities for making a difference in South Africa is really around this categorization model, where the majority of people, young people who really don't have jobs, who just want to earn some money, how awesome would that be if they could work in this open category in uncontrolled airspace with a tiny drone, a Mavic of some sorts, doing wedding photography, earning, a few $100s or what have you. Right now, in order for them to do that, they would have to incur those costs and go through that process. So the categorization model has been tabled. There is a drone federation that's been formed, which is essentially the link between the private industry or private sector and the regulator, and all the role players sit in this, this federation. And it was loosely formed anyway, and they meet once a quarter, but that has now resulted in an official mandate for CUASA to essentially start these conversations around drone registry, drone ID. Enforcement is a big thing. Without those three things, the categorization model is not even going to take off. And then, of course, the whole U-Space concept, there are work groups that have already been formed. I think this year is going to really move the dial, because everyone's in situ and now they need to start making decisions. And those decisions are around, what would this use space look like? And Louise is going to talk a little bit about that as well. The opportunities that will bring to this country with our high youth unemployment rate will be astronomical. And the cynic in us or me would say that this is still going to take another 5 years. But there's a lot of pressure. And so the structure, I think, is there. But of course, it takes political will, political skill, and funding. And so I'll stop there because otherwise we'll go on forever.
No, that was great, because I wanted the audience to have kind of a background and understand the differences. I mean, because a few minutes ago, Adrian shared with us here in the United States that it's approximately $150 to really get into the industry. And so there's a low barrier, where you're actually seeing in South Africa just the opposite. So I think that framework was a great starting point for the audience just to understand the differences. So let's transition to Louise. And Louise, you recently gave a presentation on the Uas Corridors. How would the implementation of U-Space benefit South Africa?
Well, I you know, as Kim's just said there are barriers here to innovation, to growth, to getting people involved, you know, creating even simple employment. And so, yeah, from my perspective, we've seen drone corridors in other parts of Africa and how they're enabling an environment within which to sort of test, you know, is this going to work? And a lot of those corridors have been focused on humanitarian sort of perspectives. And, you know, the idea behind the drone corridor is to provide a safe environment within which people can test, but perhaps without being under the full constraints of the current regulations. As Kim's just explained, you've got to put a lot of investment up front, you know, to be able to have some form of operation. Now, have you got a product that you can develop and take to market, and so on and so forth, before or after you spent this investment? So the idea behind the drone corridor, and in fact tying it in with a tech hub, is to create this sort of enabling environment, but within a safe environment that's been designed and worked out with the authorities to make sure that, for example, we can foster education, we can create innovation. There is so much interest, so much passion, so much potential here of people coming along and saying, I've got this idea, this is what I want to do with drones. But it becomes prohibitive to try and do it because it's so expensive and so difficult to get in. So, you know, this is the idea behind the drone corridor. And equally, you know, let's create, let's just not focus on flying drones. What about the rest of the technology? What about the rest of the ecosystem? There is such a driver here going on behind, you know, bringing, of course, drones into classrooms and STEM, and getting youth involved and getting upskilling workers and creating new opportunities. There's this groundswell underneath that is pushing drivers, and people are recognizing the big picture behind the drone technology ecosystem now. And I think, you know, there's a value in a drone corridor with a tech hub to sort of make sure that we can pick up on this potential and drive it and you know, create this positive cooperative environment with other stakeholders, and that those stakeholders can be the Civil Aviation Authority. They can be other operators that are trying to either get established or are established, want to be mentors to other operators and other opportunities, universities, you know, inventors, you name it. We need to create this positive collaborative environment. And again, the drone corridor and a tech hub in South Africa, I believe, is a way to facilitate and act as a catalyst for that sort of growth. And I think the biggest thing, the last point here on this slide, is that the big issue here is funding. Certain aspects of the industry are getting funding. And for example, that's software, because you can see the return on investment, but you can't see the return on investment on someone who says, I've got this great idea. I need $20,000 to get started. And I still don't know if it's going to be a marketable product that's scalable, et cetera, et cetera. Do you see? So I think the tech hub with the drone corridor, enabling people to test, research, develop, you know, under an easier environment, will actually provide stronger opportunities to create funding and investment opportunities and grow this industry, because that's one of the biggest things. There are so many people that are wanting to get off the ground, quite literally, excuse me, and they can't because of the restrictions and so on. So that's the idea behind the drone corridor and the sort of tech hub is, let's create an enabling, exciting environment for people to get, you know, to get going.
Well, what I find interesting is that what your need is exactly what Ernest Huffman's leadership is doing for us here in the United States. And it probably would behoove the South African aviation authorities to maybe bring Ernest in. Ernest, I'm creating an opportunity for you. Bring Ernest in as a consultant. I mean, because exactly what you laid out is what he's been actually leading the effort here on behalf of the United States, starting with Texas, but as he said, he's coordinating it with other key states across the country. So thank you for that. So I know as our time gets short, I want to make sure we cover a few other points. So Kim, back to you. How would any of these changes facilitate growth in the UAS market in South Africa?
Yeah, that's such a good question, Sharon. So the idea really is that it would enable more individual small businesses to be able to operate. And so in our country where we have so much unemployment, even one person who's able to earn money through this amazing technology would, you know, sustain an entire community, you know, in some instances. So that's not necessarily going to grow the industry, but making the barrier to entry or lowering the barrier to entry, number one, will reduce costs, because the compliance of running such an operation at this point is so high that the end costs to the client is, from a service perspective, are also high. And so the way in its simplest form, this industry is going to grow is really around, you know, organizations, companies, government even, being able to afford drone technology and services more easily, and therefore, you know, buying into it. And so, you know, smaller organizations will be able to, you know, use, and so many applications, and we don't have to go through them here because we already know what they are. And in our country, you know, we could use them across the board really, but because it's that expensive, it's just not seeing traction. From a hobby perspective, we have more drones, well, they're not registered, but we think we have more hobby drones than commercial drones for sure. And that may or may not grow. Manufacturing for sure. We really should be able to manufacture. And if the costs can come down of registering aircraft, there is funding that's made available for manufacturing, but there just isn't the end market. So, you know, there's no use manufacturing fixed wing or VTOLs or whatever if, you know, they're going to be too expensive to operate. So I think all of these things are going to have an exponential benefit realized across the ecosystem.
Thank you. So I don't know if you want to go next and talk about drone security, or if you want Luis to talk about the UAS technology in terms of 2022.
So let me just run through the security part, because it kind of leads on, and I didn't mention it now because I thought I would do this. But this is where I personally see a massive opportunity in our country. So this, for anyone on here who is involved in law enforcement or security or anything like that, these numbers might shock you. So we basically have like 20,000 commissioned police officers in this country. And our crime is very high. We have socioeconomic issues which contribute to crime. Our unemployment rates are off the scale. And so that results in people being discouraged to look for jobs. So we're sitting on like almost 45% unemployment. And so we have opportunistic crime. People just want to feed their families, but we also have hectic crime syndicates that operate, and our police force is just not set up to deal with that. Our military is also, we haven't been at war for a while, so our military is depleted. So essentially, our country is run on private security. And if you look at these stats here, we have almost 2.5 million registered private security officers. Okay, not all of them are employed. About 24% of them are employed by almost 12, or let's say 11,000 registered security businesses. It's a very regulated industry as well, by the private security industry regulator. And these guys have been doing security in the same way as they have for 50 years. But this is the industry that keeps us safe. And so basically, enter drones. They add a layer of defense, they put eyes in the sky, they add a tool into the toolbox of the security company or the ground force, the armed reaction vehicle or what have you. And the applications are anything from visible policing, which is a deterrent, to incident response, and of course post-incident in terms of footage being permissible for prosecution, etc. And so we do this as a company. We've seen real benefits to, these security guards here, which go into very, very dangerous situations in the dark, on mines where the would-be criminals are armed, and they out-arm the police and the private security. And so they now have eyes in the sky. They have an additional tool. It obviously gives them a vantage point, etc. And then, it really just elevates, even from, this is an example of a police force operation that we often do, which basically protects them. They get killed in action all the time. And so besides the benefit of making security better and being one step or even two steps or whatever ahead of the criminal at this point, what are the benefits, and what are the benefits that I think we're going to see? In fact, I just put this in. This is a picture we took last night on the site that I'm going to work on now. So we're protecting people, property, and high-value assets. We know that. However, with this categorization model, and potentially with the cost of entry reducing, we can empower communities to protect themselves if we train pilots within those communities. And there are government programs, and this is what we're going to be focusing on this year. They're government programs that fund training. So the idea is that they're just literally churning out drone pilots, but then they don't have jobs. So what we're doing this year, and this is in collaboration with a few other partners, is to train them, get them their certifications, but then actually go and do security in their communities. And so if they're protecting their own communities while they're learning to do this, and essentially if the funding can then kind of, take one further step to actually get them certified in their own right, and then work in those communities to keep their communities safe, while earning money. And when I say that, I literally get goose pimples all over my body, because that is where, you know, we're going to make such a difference in a multitude of ways. So that was a very quick overview.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think what it sheds a light on is that the huge opportunity just in security alone in South Africa is massive. So in our remaining minutes, maybe we can have Louise speak to the segment in agriculture and how drones are going to be making a difference and what your perspective is for 2022.
Yeah, thank you. I think I mentioned, I'll be very quick. You know, at the beginning, you know, drones for agriculture, a lot of people already know the benefits of using drone technology in agriculture, but sometimes it's very easy to focus on just the commercial farming, the bigger farmers. You know, if you look at World Food and Agriculture Organization numbers, we're looking at, we're increasing the number of our population is about 9 billion by about 2050. And, you know, we've got to increase the amount of food that we produce effectively by 70%, but only by using around about 5% more land. Now that sets an enormous sort of target level. And if you look at if you look at an African perspective, 80% of food production comes from subsistence farmers. And you're looking at people that are operating you know, 2 to 5 hectares of land. And I think that's really, you know, that's where your food is going to come from, because also the food organization will say a lot of people are going to move into urban areas. You're going to have around about 70% of people living in urban areas. Now, who's going to be producing all the food? So, I mean, I'm compressing this as quick down to, you know, to the broad information. But what I wanted to show is on the slide is if you look at commercial farming, some of the numbers that pop up, you know, you sort of get 15 to 30% reduction in fertilizer costs. Perhaps commercial farmers may increase their yields by 10 to 20%. That's really important from a commercial perspective. But look at these figures for subsistence farmers. And these next bunch here, and this is from self-reported figures from farmers that have been given data using drones, and you're looking at they're eliminating their crop losses by 40 to 50%. Now that's an enormous, you know, if you compare that to what a commercial farmer is gaining compared to what a subsistence farmer is gaining, trying to feed themselves, then if they've got surplus feeding other people, that's massive. And I know that these figures are still to be confirmed, but the point being is you can also, some of the other figures coming out, 55% improved water efficiency, 60% reduction in pesticide use. When you're a subsistence farmer with limited resources, you know, drone technology, drone data can help you maximize what it is that you can afford and what you can apply. And the information, you know, there's a whole, sadly I haven't got enough time, but the point being is that drone technology needs to be available as much to subsistence farmers as it needs to be available to commercial farming. And I think that's the sort of difference that we need to start seeing, is that this has got to be more inclusive. We've got to get this data. I'm not saying every farmer needs to have a drone, but they certainly need to have access to information that helps them become more productive and, you know, sort of reduce the unpredictability of farming, especially at the subsistence level. So yeah, that's how, you know, that's the sort of making a difference in 2022. We've got to start getting this information out there at all levels of farming, not just the bigger commercial farming level.
Well, it sounds like then for 2022, getting the information out there, as well as having the overall process for getting into the industry are two primary goals of hopefully accomplishing in 2022. So we've run out of time, and I think it just tells us that we're going to have you all back to educate us more and help enlighten us better understanding the drone opportunity in the market in South Africa. So thank you so much to both Kim and Louise today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharon.
And I wanted to mention that Louise and Kim have to leave soon. So if there is any questions, if you don't have a chance to ask right now, go ahead and contact them. They also have a fireside chat with Women in Drones. So they're accessible there and you have an opportunity to ask them questions there. So thank you again. I really appreciate, ladies. It's still so wonderful to see you be such big advocates for the UAS industry in South Africa and beyond. So I appreciate that.
I have,
yes, go ahead.
One question before they go. And the security application that's being used in South Africa obviously is something unique to that area of the world. It's not something that's going on here in the United States as to that extent. Is that a similar condition in other African countries where that's an opportunity where drones can be used in that manner?
So Ernest, I think there are countries in Africa that actually have a kind of they're in a war situation, so they would use, and we know, like we've got projects pending that were put on hold because of COVID and what have you, but that is kind of paramilitary stuff that they're doing there up in the northern parts of Mozambique, the DRC. There are big diamond mines in some of those parts where there are big syndicates that have to be kept out with, it's proper almost military, well, let's say paramilitary. So yeah, there is from a criminal element on citizens, I'm not sure. Where we can use the kind of enterprise drones that we use. I'm not sure, but generally the mining applications are huge, and they're generally using big fixed wing things.
What about Botswana? Because it's a country that's closer to you guys. Do you know anything about their use in drone technology? And I asked about Botswana specifically because I'll be there in December for the first time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you've got to pop into South Africa if you're going to be in Botswana.
Yeah, I think I will be. I'll be there for about a week or so for a wedding, so probably stop down in South Africa too.
I have to say that you hear, I don't know, Louise, I don't know if you've heard anything about Botswana. They don't really come up. I might be wrong, so don't quote me on it, but I've not had any inquiries, and we haven't done any work there.
10-4.
They're quite progressive though. They're quite progressive.
Yeah.
So,
like Sharon said, we are definitely going to have you guys come back, because I'm interested in the woman-owned company that helps with poaching. And so that's another big industry that, they're trying to curb that, because there are some, unfortunately, even some risks of losing some type of species, animal species, just because of their tusks and hides. So yeah, we are definitely going to have them back, Sharon. So we're going to stay in touch with the ladies, and I really appreciate your time. I know that you've got to get off to work now. So thank you, Kim. And Louise, I hope you feel better. I can relate. I think I have COVID too, so it's affecting me in so many other ways. But we always end our workshop with Evan Morelli. Evan Morelli has been.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for having us.
We'll see you guys soon, for sure.
We'll do that. Thank you.
And by the way, in February, we're doing the diversity. We're going to be talking with Sharon Rossmark on the survey that they conducted on diversity with the industry. So that's going to be really interesting. So I welcome you guys to join us there. And speaking of surveys, we have a survey on the link right now. Please take your time and fill that survey out. That way we will know exactly what subjects to bring in the year 2022. February is diversity, and in March we have some gentlemen that are going to be talking about how to get into the industry, the training that's available, and also there's a company that actually franchises drone companies, so that it's all the hard work is already planned out, mapped out, and you join in this franchise, and you already set with the community. So that's going to be a really good segment in March. Evan Morelli, hi, thank you so much for joining us again. I know that I kind of asked you to kind of give your forecast of the year 2022. Can you kind of give us some insights, and then go over a little bit of the still our safety and integration of our drones this year?
Sure. Well, with the legislative process being as slow as it is and remote ID being where it is, there isn't really much that we can expect to change as far as safety features that the common commercial pilot will want to do. So what I wanted to do is just review those things with you guys about things to keep in mind when you're about ready to run an operation. I also still have the checklist link here that I'm just going to go ahead and throw up right now. It's a Google Drive link that you feel free to download that. That's just a template that I put out that has things to consider if you're going to be running commercial operations with a drone.
Your checklist has been very popular with the audience, and I do encourage everyone to make a copy of that, because even though you think, okay, I've got this, I can handle this, I've done this 100 times, having that checklist in front of you so that that you've checked off all of the safety hazards and precautions, that's for people that have been in this industry for a long time and have flown 1,000 hours to the people that are just starting. So really appreciate that insight. Thank you, Evan.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so let me just go ahead and get into my PowerPoint here. Share my screen. Okay. Can you all see my PowerPoint all right?
Yep, we can see it. Okay. Yeah, there you go. So
we're going to be talking about on-site considerations. UTM and integration of drones is on the horizon. What it's going to end up specifically being, I guess, is a little bit of subject of, we'll just have to wait and see. But regardless, you may have a flight envelope. You're still going to have to take your specific anecdote of where you are, your landing situation into play. You'll just be able to have more integration and knowledge with the other people participating in your local airspace. So, that's going to increase the safety factor of any operator that's out especially in the DFW area, since we have such a convoluted airspace with private, commercial, helicopter. We have the helipad in downtown Dallas. We have the Air Force Base. We have the autonomous Alliance Airport and what have you. So, keeping your visual line of sight is very important. When you are trying to decide how you want to staff and how you want to manage your drone in the air, a huge factor is obviously you have to maintain visual line of sight. And so that will determine, do you need 1, 2, 5, 0 visual observers? What's the proper amount of people that you need? Because if you're going to be working in an urban environment and you go around the corner of a building, let's say you're scanning the outside of the building or doing any sort of window treatment or anything of that nature, you'll lose visual line of sight pretty immediately. So, and additionally, working at night, the regulations have moved forward as far as being able to get more regular night flying requests approved. You're gonna have to think about the gear considerations and having the 3 nautical mile strobes being available, similar to what, commercial and manned aviation is gonna have to deal with. So, if for folks that live in Texas, that our weather tends to go back and forth pretty dramatically. So it's sometimes very difficult to plan the 24, 48, 72 hours out that you need for a mission, but you should always be expecting the worst and pleasantly surprised. Is usually a fairly good default position to make sure that, if you have everything that you need for when it's terrible, if the weather's in a good scenario, then it doesn't really matter. So one of the big factors that can cause a mission to not be as successful or not successful as you want it to be, or not successful at all, is RF interference. Especially in the DFW area, we are very urbanized, whether it's from 5G towers, whether it's from other manned aviation, whether it's just from simple infrastructure and the amount of metal that's around and the raw concrete that is in our area. You got to watch out for RF interference, and that can come from RF fields coming off power lines. The large power lines that you see going down the highway or going across cities, they have I was reading this the other day, they have a 200-foot RF, electromagnetic bubble that can interact potentially with your drone, especially if you're using a DIY drone that is maybe not on an FCC licensed channel, but is working in open bands. So that's something to keep in mind, as well as rebar in the concrete. And that may not affect you like in the moment in flight, but one place it can really affect you is when you're setting up your landing and takeoff area on the onset. You know, most drones have to calibrate their GPS and their compass on the onset. That's based on magnets. And if you have metallic objects around you or any kind of magnetic interference, and you get that wrong calibration, you're gonna have a bad time. You're gonna have either not the data that you want, or it's gonna think it's somewhere else, or it's not gonna have a correct orientation and may just immediately crash. So I always try to take off on grass if I can. If I can find a nice grassy area, and I'll show here in a minute about how to set up a proper landing and takeoff zone. So being aware of what invisible metal objects may cause interference are it's one of those things that may not seem like it matters a lot, but when you see that it does matter, you realize how much it can disrupt your mission. So with your connection planning, you also need to keep in mind that if you are running in common band, or the bands that are not FCC specifically licensed, you can, and even in some ways with the FCC licensed bands, you can get interference from other shortwave radio or RF interference areas. So planning to figure out, okay, well, if I'm going a certain distance, let's say I'm going to peak visual line of sight or something like that, do I want to use a 2.4 gigahertz connection, or do I want to use a 5.8 gigahertz connection? And the difference is Wi-Fi versus Bluetooth. Bluetooth is 2.4, Wi-Fi is 5.8. You get twice the distance, half the data. It's pretty much that simple. And you can get more distance by bringing it down to megahertz and so on and so forth, like 900 or 1.3, 1.9 gigahertz to get more range. But again, you're going to be limiting your data or creating a delay. So paying attention, most of like DJI drones and off-the-shelf drones will typically have a controller based on 2.4 gigahertz, but the video will be 5.8 gigahertz. So you'll typically have multiple connections. That's something that you need to be expressly familiar with your equipment, about how and why and how much data is going to be able to communicate with your ground station. Again, if you're using non-FCC licensed bands, you need to look at getting your ham license. That is a requirement by law, but also it's really great information to have shortwave radio understanding and knowledge and education and training to make sure that you can actually quantify, oh, hey, I'm good here. I'm good using this power wattage. I'm good using this particular frequency band, and so on and so forth. So wind and weather conditions, as I mentioned earlier, wind and weather conditions, they can vary dramatically. We can have this, like for instance, here in Texas, we had a 80-degree shift from El Paso down to Texarkana. They were 80-degree difference. That will dramatically affect batteries, wind, air density. The wind can come and go very quickly in this state. It is something to be expressly familiar with the OEM parameters of your system. Hello?
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted to...
It's breaking up on the audio, but we can hear you just fine. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to make sure. So you want to make sure that you understand, intently where the wind gust parameters do exist with your drone. Now, if you have a DIY drone, you're gonna have to figure that out. So good luck with that. But I'm not an engineer. However, if you are buying a drone off the shelf, it's very important to know, okay, well, I'm going to check my wind parameters, especially with you would think heavier drones are more like larger drones, like maybe a Matrice or what have you, like 600 Pro or something to that effect, or like a VTOL drone, a tilt rotor that is, may have more ability to weather the wind, but it also depends upon the payload. Typically drones that are much larger with a heavy payload actually don't have that much more robustness against wind gusts, and they tend to get skewed off, which can affect your data at minimum, but also can cause a crash, because again, keep in mind that multi-rotors are essentially a spindle top, right? You want to get their center of gravity as low as possible, but if they get tilted too far off in a certain direction, it's done. you're not going to be able to recover in some cases. So, be careful with your lance lead time, 24 hours. Some places, some grids require 24 hours more of lance authorization requests. Some of them you can do right on the spot. Just depends. Alliance Airport, for instance, is one that if you're using any of the adjacent grids that it requires at least 24-hour advance notice for your lance request, or you get automatically denied.
Evan, do you mind if I interject?
Sure.
Our last workshop in December, we had Mark Colburn on, and he specifically talked about the procedures to acquire lance authorization. And also Airspace Link was one of our presenters, and it talked about the process. So I think that those are really good references to go back and look at. So I think that that'll be really great.
Yeah, and similar to what you're saying, or to continue on with that, there's going to be changing portals for commercial users to be able to access, not only for weather data, but for authorization and more up-to-date telemetry that can help plan a safer flight. And so keeping your kind of ear to the ground and reviewing our previous workshops, but also looking for news sources that can expose you to the new companies and new technologies is also a safety factor increase for your mission, so that you're using the latest technology that creates safety. So I also, as well, I always recommend this, using a handheld wind gauge on your actual site, because again, there's a certain amount of specificity to the weather forecast. You want to know exactly how the wind is right where you are. So that's a good gauge. That's a good piece of equipment that I always keep on me whenever I'm running a commercial operation.
And I don't know if you mentioned this, but it's really important that this is not just for commercial use. Everything that Evan is providing, especially the check, the safety check form that he's provided, is for recreational and commercial use, because no matter who you are, when you're up in the airspace, you are responsible for safety procedures. So no matter what you do. So I wanted to emphasize that all these tips are really good, but it's not just commercial use. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks for adding that, Maggie. It is true. It doesn't matter what you're flying. These are general safety considerations for having an aircraft, an unmanned aircraft in the national airspace, regardless of intent. In order to, if your objective is just to go take some cool footage, if your objective is just to have a fun flight, all these things still apply. Maybe not, getting lance authorization, depending upon if you're in a FRIA or what have you, but the safety factors do apply. So I always recommend for equipments, this is simple checklists, similar to what I had put in the link for everybody, but you always want to make sure you have backup batteries, toolkits. You should, everybody has a different level of technical ability, but things are going to break down. This machine breaks all the time, and having the ability to do small, minor, if you have the technical ability, major repairs or services in the field can really save a whole day of flying. When you are running if you're doing FPV, or if you're doing a commercial operation and you need to have a visual observer, like let's say you're using overhead goggles for FPV flying, then making sure that you have your visual observer accessible. If you have them on the other side of a building, you don't want to be yelling from one side of the parking lot to the other when they're going like, stay back. No, you want to have, cell phones work really well, but also walkie-talkies can work very effectively as far as being able to be communicative with your support team. And safety equipment, I always have a first aid kit with me. I always have, my reflective vest. If you are doing commercial, and I would say even for recreational, we as a community don't want to look sketchy when we're out flying. We want to say like, hey, look, we have rights as pilots. We have rights to be here. We have rights to access the national airspace through proper channels. And if we're working for a company and have, been granted access to a property, like, you can stand your ground and say, no, look, I understand that you may be suspect to what we're doing here, but we are legitimate. And the more legitimate you look, from my experiences, or in the insurance industry and film and video, you get less hostility from potential people that thinking, you're trying to take a photo into their home or what have you. They'll be like, oh, well, this if you kind of look like you're supposed to be there, typically people don't question you quite as much. So, maybe even having hard hats depending upon the requirements if you're working in a construction site, but having your documentation, your license, reflective clothing and stuff will limit any sort of mostly the negative conversations you may have with bystanders. You also want to have your landing pad and spacing cones. The spacing cones part, and I'll get to that more in a minute, is going to be really important. Even though it may not seem super important, it will help create a buffer area. So this is the same stuff in the pre-flight checklist, so I'm not really going to go over that. Y'all can look over that documentation. These are just recommended things. There's probably more stuff that you may want to add on depending upon your kind of operations or what you want to do. But, I felt this was a good minimum bar to begin with. So let's talk about battery maintenance. Battery maintenance is extremely important, and it doesn't matter what kind of flying you're doing, because these batteries, they're consumable. You will turn them over, you will get rid of them, you will buy new ones. If you fly regularly, you will be able to notice when and how they start to degrade in performance. So for people that aren't aware with lithium-ion batteries, or lithium polymer batteries, is they actually are balanced between 4.2 volts and 3.8 volts per cell. That means if you overcharge them, which most off-the-shelf drone batteries will have a regulator chip attached to the battery, which will keep it from being overcharged or over-discharged, that can cause stability issues if it is overcharged or over-discharged. If you overcharge it enough, it will light on fire and combust, and you'll have a whole big problem. And if it gets too low, then it's just be very difficult to ever get a charge to hold it in ever again. But nonetheless, it's unstable on either side. So if you're using what's like a naked battery or something you would use with a racing drone, you can it's just got leads attached to the wafer cells. You can just charge it up as much as you want and make it go pop if you want. So, but you want to be able to understand that 4.2 volts to 3.8 volts is actually just a small range in what you can physically put into the battery, but anything outside of that range isn't going to be that helpful, except for in some very, very niche circumstances. But when you're not using your batteries, you want to have them in storage mode. Not all batteries have a storage mode from off-the-shelf, PCB regulated drone batteries. And what's going to happen with those batteries, and you have to keep that in mind, is you take a DJI battery and you've got it fully charged or whatever, which will be 4.2, 4.1, and you put it up on the shelf and leave it there, that PCB regulator is going to slowly drain the battery. So if you leave it there for a year, you're going to come back and it's going to be at like 2 volts and it's going to be trash and you're going to have to get rid of it. So, batteries are something you need to constantly check in on. However, if you have like I said, it was a naked battery, and you put it into a storage mode, which is typically between 3.75 and 3.8 volts per cell, you can actually leave it on the shelf for quite some time because there's no attached electronics that are going to slowly parasitically bleed electricity out of the cell. The chemistry will be stabilized in the actual battery. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it's kind of difficult sometimes to deal with the weather fluctuations in Texas, but you have to understand that if you do store your batteries outside in like your garage or in a shed or what have you, and it's really cold and that area is not heated, cold performance of LiPo batteries is horrible. You will not get nearly the voltage, or not the voltage, but the output that you're going to need, the amperage that you're going to need to get your expected performance. So if you're out, make sure you warm them up, get them at room temperature before you use them. If you just pop them in, really cold, you're going to notice that it's not working as well as it should. And every time you do cycle over your batteries, which means you fully discharge it down to 3.8, charge it back up to 4.2, that's a cycle. And that cycle is a lifespan. It eats away at the lifespan of the battery. And those batteries have memory, which means that as you continue to cycle them, they will degrade in performance. Not all batteries work the same as far as the number of cycles before they degrade. It just really depends on the brand, the quality, whether it's got a PCB on it, how much you use it, how hard you use it. Are you doing a lot of punch outs with your drone? Or are you just doing pretty regulated scanning, right? Where there's not taking a whole tremendous amount of amps and discharging it really quickly. but that memory is going to matter. So one of the things that I highly recommend is with all of your batteries, I take painter's tape. It works really well. And I just dash it every time I cycle it. I dash it so I can tell which batteries are the ones I use most frequently and which ones are probably going to not have as much performance and which ones are not. Additionally, considering they're all probably going to be the same, you know that you're not going to front load one battery that just happens to be the one that gets charged every single time while the rest of them aren't getting used. And you'll want to, I recommend, and I do, distribute the amount of wear across all of the batteries that I have so they stay good longer. So required personnel, we've talked about visual observers. Your PIC, you as a pilot can act as your visual observer. If you're doing hobbyist flying or what have you, you don't necessarily need a visual observer, but typically in commercial operations, or if you're using FPV, you're going to need at least one. Right? If you're an FPV, you cannot satisfy, and you have the goggles on your face, you cannot satisfy the visual line of sight requirement for your drone by yourself. You just can't. It's not possible. So you have to have an observer, somebody spotting you. And any of the clubs like Dallas Drones and all the ones that operate here in DFW, which there's a very large drone racing community here, they all practice that. They have scheduled areas where they fly. They have spotters. They make sure that they keep very attuned attention to where the drones are, how fast they're going, whether they're in a safe area, and people keep eyes on them the whole time. So your pre-flight planning, your visual observer acts as your second pair of eyes. You're going to want to have that walkie-talkie, and they should be pre-positioned prior to takeoff. That part is important. You want to make sure that you've set up, you kind of ran through, you want to plan your flight and fly your plane, ideally. And that's a little mantra I go by. I want to know what that flight's going to be like at the takeoff, during, and how it's going to end. And what's going to happen if I'm going to have any kind of issues. What's that going to look like? How am I going to address it? What is my visual observer supposed to do? What is the factors involved here? So I know I'm out of time.
No, Evan, you know what? It was a very good point, and I don't think we've really mentioned this before. Is the understanding that there is a process of the pre-flight, and then actually during flight, but also it's really, even if it's just sharing it with your visual observer of the day, of talking about what can we do, how did the mission go, what can we do to improve it next time. Those are really key elements, I think, as being a responsible pilot and flying safe. So that's really a good point. And yeah, we are running out of time. I think one of the other things that's really important for anyone that's listening is, we've given you a lot of resources for local clubs, local organizations. But I encourage anyone, even if you're not in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, to find like-minded people. So, your visual observer, maybe he's another pilot or she's another pilot, and they understand what they need to look for. But I think it's really important that, you share ideas, you share, maybe, your strong point is flying, and the other person that you're working with, strong point is the maintenance of a drone or how it's used, or collecting data. I mean, there's such good information and resources out now that I encourage everyone to belong to these organizations or reach out to make sure that you are flying with other people, because that's the whole purpose of these workshops. And that's why we're up to 15, and I'm looking forward to 20 and beyond, is just educating, putting ideas and information like Evan gives us every workshop, resources of being safe out there, things that you may not have thought about. That's why we try to encourage these workshops and encourage Evan to always end our workshops with safety mechanisms and things to think out of the box, maybe, that you wouldn't think about. For instance, the battery maintenance is always key, and I really always enjoy that segment that you bring up. But overall, is there anything else you want to end with? Because I know that we want to respect everyone's time. It's 1 minute after 12 here in Texas. So,
putting together a good maintenance schedule and flight logs, similar to an artist or anybody else like an architect, or, your flight log is not only your proof if you ever have the FAA come and audit you, but it's also your evidence of competency. So the paperwork side of it, nobody wants to do, but it won't be important until it's really, really important. So having the discipline to have the maintenance schedules, monitoring your batteries, that back end, and it doesn't matter, hobbyist or not, that is extremely important.
Exactly. Well, thank you again so much. I want to thank all the presenters, Ernest, Rhonda, Adrian, Kim, Louise, of course, Sharon Rossmark. Looking forward to everyone joining us in February, the first Saturday of February, where we're going to have Sharon specifically address the survey that we have on diversity. And then in March, again, I mentioned that we're going to have some gentlemen talking specifically about how to start and train for this industry. So thank you again for joining us. I really appreciate it. Happy New Year to everyone. And we will have this workshop recorded and available on our northtexasuas.com website. So thanks again, everyone. You have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Happy New Year.
Yes, Happy New Year.